Welcome to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast. Today, I have a interview conversation with Roger Jones. He is the author of The Final Victory, and this is a sort of a novel, but it's inspired by true events about dragon boat racing, which is essentially these giant canoes. 20 people are paddling in them. Really, really exciting stuff. They race it all over the world, and essentially it's his involvement with all of that, and also the fact that his entire team is made up of people who have either beaten cancer or are dealing with it currently. So I've just delved in. I'm saving the rest of it for my canoe trip, oddly enough, happening right now. And yeah, it's pretty interesting. And Roger and I sort of just get into everything from the actual functioning of a dragon boat race to some of what sports and team camaraderie and everything can really, how helpful that can be for a person, especially in that sort of difficult situation. And Roger is a great guy down there in South Carolina. Just hearing his accent, I immediately was like, oh, Buford, I want to go back to Buford. But yeah, it was really fun to talk to him. We talked sailing as well, and really get into it. So definitely want to check out the book. There are links to his website and all that sort of stuff in the description of this episode, but definitely check it out because he's doing a lot of really good stuff, coaching and being involved with these teams. And it's pretty inspiring. So well worth the read. I'm definitely enjoying the book, and I absolutely had a great time talking with Roger. Now, before we start the show, like I always say, as quick as I can, if you want to help support this channel, this podcast, you can become part of the Patreon family, 61 strong, I think, at this point. Absolutely can't thank you guys enough. We've got links for one-time donations via PayPal, Venmo, all that's in the description. And then obviously we got the merch, we got the shirts, we got the books, the children's books, all that sort of stuff. And I did actually just finish the second hardcover. So the complete series of the Sailing into Oblivion children's book is finished and available on Amazon. Links in the description as well. And then all the other books and audiobooks and stuff like that. But check out the website if you want to reach out to the show directly to me, sailingintooblivion.com, for events or possibly doing speaking, stuff like that. And also the online coaching and training on sailboats. So a lot of stuff to offer. Hopefully those are all good ways to help support this channel and this show. And without further ado, my conversation with Roger Jones. This podcast is always kind of a back and forth, just a conversation. But Roger Jones, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking a little bit of time this morning.
My pleasure. Welcome to be here. Glad to be here.
Well, and one of the funniest things, because I'm just getting into the book that I've always enjoyed about reading specific books, where all of a sudden I'm seeing names of places that I have spent a good amount of time. When I see like Buford and Charleston, it just kind of, I don't know, there's something about it where all of a sudden I feel a little bit more like I'm relating to that book because I can really picture it. Have you lived down there your whole life?
I'm originally from South Carolina. I've lived in Charleston for 20 years. So, and moved around. I went to college in Tennessee and moved around a little bit and then moved back in South Carolina. But we love the low country in South Carolina for sure. Yeah.
And now when people refer to it as the ditch, is that sort of derogatory?
I don't know. We have a lot of water that flows and flows from here to the ocean, and it is kind of a ditch. So we love our waterways. So I don't take it as a negative comment at all.
Well, and I definitely wouldn't. I mean, it is. I always like that other saying of South Carolina is where winter. What is it? Where winter arrives unnoticed, or something like that.
I've not heard that before.
It is.
That's good. Yeah.
Well, down in Buford, I think out of all the winters I spent, there was only one where we had some frost on the dock.
Yeah.
And being from northern Michigan, that's kind of a nice treat for me.
That's very nice. Yeah, we have very few days in the 20s, and
Yeah.
rare to it gets into the teens. So, but we did have about 5 years ago. We had about 5 or 6 inches of snow, which was extremely rare. It'd been at least 25 years since we'd had any significant snow. So the whole town shut down. Everybody went crazy. So it was fun.
Yeah, you don't. I don't suppose they keep a lot of snow plows
No,
on
they do
demand down
not.
there.
No.
Well, Roger, this book, The Final Victory, really, it's got me. I'm headed out on a camping trip tomorrow, actually,
Wonderful.
and so I'm saving the rest of it. But and I don't want to obviously give away too many spoilers and such. But I'm essentially at a point where they're trying to get you to be a coach, and you are begrudgingly not going along with that. But I guess my first question was, can you just describe some of these dragon boats? I mean, this was really amazing because I watched some YouTube videos on it, and I was blown away. These things are so cool.
It is. It's a wonderful sport. I call it the phenomenon of dragon boating, and dragon boating as a sport is over a 2,000-year-old sport that started in China, and then it died down, and in the mid '90s, how it revived itself in North America and Canada, United States. There was a physician in the Vancouver area who was treating a lot of breast cancer patients. And at that time, they discouraged breast cancer patients from exercising because they felt it would be negative for their bodies and called lymphoma and so or lymphedema, if you would, and so forth. So he didn't agree with that. So he put a study together to put women in the boat, and it was a couple-year study that he did, and the women just excelled and did great and in every way, not just physically but emotionally, in a support group and so forth. So he published a paper, and from that point, dragon boating from the mid '90s just exploded in the United States, and it really started as a breast cancer. Then it expanded into uh, all type of cancer patients paddling, and now it's just a worldwide sport where just hundreds of thousands of people paddle and enjoy it, from young people, and they have all kind of different divisions. In fact, we have a team from Charleston currently that is in Italy paddling at the Worlds, and they
Oh,
have
really?
hundreds of teams from all over the world that are paddling and competing and racing in Italy right now. So it's really becoming a phenomenon, and I think the reason why is that you can do it when you're young, you can do it when you're old. I'm 70, and I still paddle pretty regularly, and they just developed a division that they call it Senior D, which is people over 70 years and older, and then it's a great team sport, and it just builds camaraderie and support, and especially with a lot of the cancer survivors, it becomes a wonderful support group for people who are going through much of the same type of treatments and so forth. So it's just it, and it's a long boat. It's a 45-foot boat. Has 20 paddlers, 10 on the right, 10 on the left, and
Jeez.
yeah. So it had, and so you got to coordinate, and you have
Oh
to
yeah.
timing is critical and difficult to do.
Well,
So
is there a sorry to interrupt, but is there like a coxswain who's sitting up there telling people to stroke and kind of keep it going? It sounded like it from some of the videos I watched.
yeah. There's a steers person in the back that has a oar that actually
Hmm.
steers the boat, and the paddlers have a paddle, not an oar, but a paddle. But then we call it a drummer. So there's a person in front of the boat that sits on a seat and has a big drum in front of them. So they're beating the drum, and theoretically they're setting the tone of the race, the pace of the race, how fast the stroke's going to be, and so forth. So and a lot of the boats have speakers lined up and down the boat, so that the coxswain, if you will, or the drummer, has a microphone, and he or she's
Yeah,
yelling out instructions. So yeah, you do, yeah, and they'll
that's
yell
very.
at you badly if you don't do it right.
Well, I mean, to be able to coordinate 20 paddlers and to do it, like the really interesting thing thought was how hard they dig to get that boat moving in the beginning, to go from a dead stop and it's just dig, and then they're like, all right, low gear and all this sort of stuff. And how long is the race?
Well, the typical races have three or four different lengths. They have a 200 meters, which is pretty much a sprint,
Yeah.
and the good boats do that in 50 to 60 seconds. The most typical, most common race is 500 meters, and that I always compared that if you ever ran track to like a 400-meter event. So you
Right.
can't really sprint that. You like you say, you get off to a start. You got to get the boat moving, like any boat. You got to get it planed and moving. And in the 500 meters, you got to get into a pace that you can withstand, and then you, of course, want to finish strong. Most of the 500-meter races are in the 2 to 2.5 minutes, and I always say it's the longest 2 minutes in your life. And then and then the other one is a 2,000 meters, which is a very interesting race. The 2,000 meters is kind of a circle. So you go 500 meters and then you turn 500 meters
Oh,
and turn
wow.
and 500 meters, and you do that twice. And so the steers person is very critical
Yeah.
in that race,
How,
because you got to really turn tightly. If you don't, other teams will pass you. So those are
but
probably
that's
the three most common races: is the 200 meters, the 500 meters, and the 2,000 meters.
okay. And when you make that turn, because you said you pretty much get up onto a plane almost.
Yes,
I mean, how what sort of speed are you getting to then?
I probably at a 200 meters, you probably at a 8 to 10 knots,
Oh,
something
nice.
like that. So you're moving along pretty nicely. The 2,000 meters is a little different. That's a long one, so you're really pacing yourself.
Yeah.
And of course, that last 500 meters, you're digging, you're
Ugh.
giving it all you got, and you're about to throw up. And but and you're just trying. All you're trying to do is finish the best you can, and after 1,500 meters, you're tired. So then it's just
Yeah.
it's just guts. You know how it is. You played sports, so you know what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, I know that feeling where you've exhausted everything, or
Yeah.
you physically collapse at the end. I actually had one of the members of the Ohio State rowing team, Catherine. She was on the show, and she was just telling me that not only in the races but in the practices, you literally want to be able to collapse where you cannot physically do anything else once that race finishes. That's when you
Yeah.
know you've put 100% in.
Yeah, we have a saying: if you can talk at practices, if you can talk after we have a hard race practice, we do a 200, 500 meter, just maybe two or three or four back to back. And if you
Yeah.
can talk when that's done, then you've not exerted yourself enough. you,
You still
you,
got a little something left.
that's right. You should not be able to even speak. That's right.
Well, for my experience, I mean, as a sailor, my job, I guess, would be the equivalent of the drummer on the boat, because I'm not exerting myself unless I absolutely had to. Uh, even next week when I go camping, we're going canoeing. The hardest part of that's going to be picking the great little fishing hole, and of course maybe portaging from lake to lake. But yeah, it is fun. There is something about that where when you start to really get into a rhythm, and there's only two of us on our canoe, and you start really putting it down, and every once in a
Oh
while you're
yeah,
just digging and feeling that water, and you're
absolutely.
just straight as an arrow. It is pretty cool. I've always enjoyed canoeing, but you've sparked my interest. I tell you, next time I'm getting down there, I want to try and find a
No,
day where I can go out and hop on one of those boats.
well, if you're here, you're welcome. And where do you live? Where do you live, Jerome?
Well, so I kind of live a split life at this point. I'm up in northern Michigan. Kind of home base is up here. My family's from here, but the boat, Mighty Sparrow, she's down in Belhaven, North Carolina this
Yeah.
year, and so I'll spend a decent amount of time down there. And if I put it in the water, then I'll go out, do a little ocean sailing, and then probably bring it back somewhere. Might be back to Buford. I'm not too sure, but definitely south of Cape Hatteras. That's where I like to keep it in the
Very
wintertime.
nice. Well, if you ever desire it and look around, especially in that part of North Carolina, coming down the coast of South Carolina, there's a number of dragon boat clubs that you can just look up, and
Okay.
they love to have people just join them. And
Oh, I'm sure.
if you ever get the itch to do it, then contact one of them, and I'm sure they'd love to have you participate.
Well, and that's like a common problem even on a sailboat when the owner is kind of like, man, I can never find a crew member. All I need is one or two people. You're talking about 20 on that boat, and they got to go up and show up to work
Yes.
essentially. But it does, yeah. It sounds like it would be a lot of fun. So I appreciate that invite. I'll hopefully be able to take you up on that.
Yeah, me too.
That would be very cool. Um, one of the other sort of, I guess the one of the big themes with the book is really kind of how sports is is so beneficial, not only in just the physicality of it, so it keeps you healthy and all that sort of stuff, but also in this book we're talking about the rejuvenative sort of therapeutic almost aspects of how that physical work when you're doing this can really, I don't know, just help in a lot of ways. Is there? Can you shed a little bit of light on that?
Yeah, and I think dragon boating is a bit unique in the sporting world, where if you go to a dragon boat event or what we call a festival, and if you start speaking and talking to people, you'll find probably 50% of them there. This is the first athletic attempt that they've ever done in their life, especially a lot of the
Wow.
ladies. And, they didn't grow up in a sporting world. They didn't necessarily grow up being an athlete. And when they start dragon boating, they're quite intimidated by sports and so
Yeah.
forth. And this has been a sport that's welcomed them and allowed them to get in a boat and participate in a team sport. So I think it's unique in that it allows people who haven't really been that athletic in their earlier life to participate in a sport and become athletic and achieve something. I mean, there's this a special feeling to work hard and achieve something. And it's in twofold. One is that you achieve it for yourself and you work hard and you achieve it for yourself. But I think it's even more special when you achieve it with a team and
Yeah.
and you win as a team. So it's an individual victory and a team and even not just winning the race necessarily, but in many of these cases just competing is winning and being
Yeah.
on the water and even finishing the race and being able to do that after a lot of the treatments and so forth that many of these people have gone through. uh, I mean, that's a great victory in itself.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, even though I'm coming from a background of solo sailing, which is it's just me out there on that boat, but I can definitely relate to that idea of just trying. You just want to be out there doing the sport, and you're actually uh, trying to, for me, it was trying to make it all the way around the world.
That's
And
huge.
I actually, that one's, yeah, our world is pretty big. I can tell you exactly how big it is. But I talked to a lot of people recently that are joining a round the world solo race on older boats like mine for 2026. And the vast majority of them, they realize that they're in a race, they're competing against other sailors, but most of them just want to be out there and they just want to be able to try and complete the course. For them, that's the major goal. How well they do against the other sailors isn't so much a priority.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, I think at its root, sports is like that. It's just like I just want to be out there doing it, playing this game, having that fun, and being involved.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
if you get to have that team aspect around you, because that I think it really propels us and brings us up to a higher level when you got that camaraderie of people right around helping you.
Yes, I totally agree. It's just all that special. I just to share a short story with you. When I first moved to Charleston, I met a guy who was a sailor, and he asked me, said, "Why don't you come race with me?" And here in Charleston, every Wednesday night they have races in the Charleston Harbor.
Oh yeah.
You probably familiar with. I've never even put foot on a sailboat, so I was a crew with him for five summers. I was what I called a rail meat. I just went from one
Yeah.
side to the other. But finally, we got a spinnaker, and and I could operate the spinnaker, and that's about all I could do. But I mean, you talk about it, crewing. I mean, there's a lot of coordination and teamwork with
Oh
sailing.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Uh-huh.
it's quite complicated. So
Oh, you get a lot of lines, especially on those race boats,
yeah,
and because everybody's trying to do it just right. Because if you foul up one thing, then all of a
yeah,
sudden, the
yeah.
sail's not working right. Everybody else is pulling away from you, and there always has been, and I'm sure there always will be, a really big bit of ego when it comes to racing sailboats,
Well, no
and that's
question.
when the yelling begins and all that sort of stuff,
Yeah,
which
there
is
might be a little swearing goes on every now and
just a little bit.
then.
But truth be told, though, I've never been much of a racer. I've organized 1,000 races over my years, but for me, it's been more about the connection between me and the ocean world and the
Yeah,
boat and the wind. And I still want to sail the boat as fast as possible. But the idea of measuring myself against somebody else, at least when it came to sailing, was never a priority. Now, however, when I was younger and I ran track and field. Oh my gosh, that competitive spirit. Whoo. It's amazing how it wells up in you the minute you get close to that start line, right?
even if you say you're never going to be that way again, as soon as you get on the starting line, there it comes.
I know. It's like the flip of a switch. I can even remember in just playing like billiards. I like to play pool a lot, and if I'm playing casually, it's all good. But as soon as there's a person that I'm like, I don't know if I can beat them, all of a sudden the nerves start.
Well, talk about sailing. There really is something uniquely special when you cut the motor off and it's only the wind and it's
Mm-hmm.
just quiet. And I mean, you can hear the dolphins swim by and blow water
Yeah.
out of their blowhole. And I mean, that's a special time when it's that quiet on the water.
It's pretty amazing, and it does get like that even when you're 1,000 miles offshore, out in the middle of the ocean. You'll get in between these weather systems, and it'll go as flat as a pancake out there. And it's really interesting. Speaking of the dolphins, in the middle of the night, they'll come up and they sort of sleep on the surface,
Yeah,
but they're sometimes they'll collect around the boat, and you can hear them. They're still breathing.
yeah.
It's the oddest sort of thing, and then you never know. A tropical storm rolls through, and that's not quiet at all. I'll
No,
tell you that much.
that's not quiet.
No, those are very loud moments. I've wandered into some storms out there. You guys got the Gulf Stream not too far offshore from Charleston, and whenever you try and get down to the Caribbean, you essentially the easy route is to go due east from Charleston all the way out to 65 degrees longitude, and then you go directly south, and that kind of works best with the winds, but you've got to cross the Gulf Stream, and some of the storms that roll off, especially in the wintertime, can produce some really nasty conditions. And
Oh,
I've found myself stuck in those a couple of
ooh,
times.
that would scare me.
Yeah, it's kind of and I guess it's still kind of in the realm of what we're talking about, because if there were something that I'm sort of battling against or trying to compete against, it's kind of a war of attrition. Well, not attrition, because the ocean's never going to give up. It's always going to be there, but it's like these little battles of like, let me see if I can stand up to your forces for the next month or so while I'm trying to go from here to here.
Yeah,
And I guess in some ways it's kind of like a bit of a competition.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
absolutely.
But I don't know. It is kind of I don't know. I still going back to the dragon boats. It's just those things. I just the sound of everybody all in that same rhythm, like it is a heartbeat.
Yeah,
I can see how just that must be an amazing feeling to just drop the paddle after you've crossed that finish line. Just like, whew. What's one of the greatest races or great racing experiences that you had? I guess over the whole career, or maybe in the beginning when you were first getting into it.
yeah. We the first race I ever did, we went to Atlanta. No, I'm sorry. We went to Orlando and we paddled at Disney World at one of the lakes there in Disney World, and it was a 500 meters, and I had no clue really what I was doing, and and I started off with just as hard as I could go, and I kept paddling and as hard as I could, and then we got about 300 meters. I just exhausted and I mean I was I got sick. I mean I just you just begin to learn how to do it. But one of the best races we had a group of ragtag guys that were also, it was a few years later in Orlando, and they had a team from Chicago called the Windy City Dragon Boat Club, and they had a group of guys that had won the nationals, won the worlds the year before, and we pulled a group together to race them in a 500 meters, and it was really quite amazing in that we had our timing down. It was a strong group, and it was like, and we won. We beat them, and they hadn't been beaten in several years. And of course, that was a lot of fun just to beat them. But it was like every time the paddle hit the water, it was almost effortless. It felt like, and
Really?
yeah, it was a really unique experience, and you could just feel the boat moving on plane, and every stroke was if just kind of smooth through the water. So that was a special race, and of course, winning the national championship in Chattanooga, we
Yeah.
that was obviously special, and beating the Leathernecks from the villages down in Florida, and they were very gracious to us, and they heard that we had who we were, and that we were a boat full of cancer patients and survivors, and at the very end they presented me as the captain of the team a banner, and that was obviously a very, very special moment.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine. And I think that it's good to kind of reiterate or know, it's not just people who have survived and beaten cancer that are on your crew. It's people who are actually physically going through it at that time,
Yes.
and they're still in there. And I mean that's impressive. I couldn't even imagine. I have quite a bit of friends in close friends in my life over the last probably 10 years that have been either diagnosed with some autoimmune disease or cancer. I had a good friend of mine who's actually been on the show. Shout out to Rob, who has beaten brain cancer essentially
Wow.
3 times, but is
Wow.
now back for a fourth. And this is one of the most upbeat guys I've ever met in my life. He's a sailor, and I fortunately have never had to deal with that, but I can only imagine that I don't know how I would react to that, and if I would be able to go on sort of living or be able to take on these extra challenges.
Yeah.
But from a lot of what I'm starting to get from you and from the book is that those challenges are really helpful and beneficial.
They certainly are. And just to give an example, in the book, there's a character, and of course the book is fiction, but it's closely related to the true story.
Yeah.
And there's a character called Sean in the book. His real name was Mark Scarborough, and he had stage 4 colon cancer, and he wrote a blog, and and um, and one of the entries in the blog, he compared having cancer to winning the lottery. And as you read the book, you'll see his wife. He passed away about a year after we won the national championship, and he had a ileostomy and a colostomy, and he had a special belt made to hold him in place while he paddled and raced. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just a courageous man. And his wife gave me permission to put that specific part of his blog comparing cancer to winning the lottery, and it's a good example of the attitude that he had to really use cancer as not an excuse but a reason to live. And he talked about how it opened doors, and how he knew who his real friends were, and a lot of things that happened to him that would have never happened if he hadn't had cancer. So, I mean, obviously he would have chosen not to have cancer if he'd had that choice.
Right.
But since that what was deemed for him, the approach he took was really quite amazing. And when you get to that part in the book, you'll recognize the excerpt where he compares cancer to winning the lottery, and I think you'll find it moving.
Oh, I'm sure. With some of the exploits that I've done, I've found myself on numerous occasions wondering if I'm gonna make it through the night. In 2022, I got basically hit by a rogue wave and turned upside down about 400 miles out, and broke a bunch of stuff, injured myself, and that was about as close as it's come to losing it all.
That's
But
close.
boy, does that give you a lot of perspective that I carry with me when I get back to land, and I've done it enough where it doesn't sort of wear off anymore, and I know that I've got this little bit of time. I don't know how much I have. I'm not going to bank that, oh, I got plenty of time. We'll do that later. It's more of a, you know what? It almost, I guess the best way to put it is it almost gives you a bit of confidence going through life that you wouldn't have if you're sort of like, well, I got all this time when you've sort of seen the other side a little bit, or you've been confronted by your mortality in a very real way.
Yes,
I seem to sort of be like, well, you know what? I'm going to utilize every last moment that I have, and I'm going to do it my way. And you know what? If I fail, I fail. But I'm not gonna postpone, and I'm not going to be afraid. I'm just going to go after it.
yeah,
And so I could see how that whole idea of yeah, I got diagnosed with cancer. In some ways, it is like winning the lotto, because all of a sudden you have no reason, no excuse not to do exactly go after what you want
that's
and
right.
chase after those dreams, right?
That's exactly right. And and I think as if you ever have the opportunity to really get around, some of the folks in the sport, you'll hear that over and over and over. And it's just really rewarding and refreshing, and to get around folks that are using um, instances in their life as a reason to do things, and not an excuse not to do something. And
Not to do it, yeah.
and it encourages you and me to press on.
Well, and that's so because you've been working in this arena of all the philanthropy with this, and working with all. Can you talk about how many groups you're working with and all that sort of stuff?
In the dragon boat world,
I guess in the Dragon Boat world, but also just raising awareness, and just because you're working with people who have all dealt with the cancer and everything like that.
yeah, one some of the things that have been important to me is working with younger kids,
Mm.
and trying to bring some of that perspective into them. And when you're young, I mean, it's like you were saying earlier, Jerome. I mean, you feel like you got all the time in the world. I mean,
Yeah,
you're invincible and bulletproof and all the above, and but begin to have some appreciation and perspective on time and decisions and goals. And one of the things that we've really been trying to do here is work with children in who are lacking in literacy. And I've written a book, and writing and reading is something that's very personal to me, and we're trying to bring that into the literacy into the lives of some young kids who can't read. And we found that if they can't read, I'm getting off the topic just a little bit, but
oh, it's okay.
it's an effort that's important to us. and we found that, you know, if you can't read, then you just can't make it. You can't be successful, and all that is part of life. And bringing them into a boat or bringing them into you know, and I know some sailing efforts that have been working with younger kids and trying to get them on a sailboat and being part of something and seeing there's a bigger world and then bringing that back. And what we're trying to do is bring it back into just the basic skill of reading, and
Yeah.
because they, you know, they can't finish school, they can't really get a maybe get a job that they're capable of doing. And some of the athletic endeavors, I think, transfers over to that. And so that's one effort we're trying to do. That's just been important to me. And I decided I wanted to write this book when I was in treatment in Germany. And I don't know, you may have not gotten in the book yet, where I traveled to Germany for treatment for my specific kind of cancer, which of course that treatment that I had in Germany is was approved in the United States in 2018. And that's, when I decided I wanted to tell this story and become a writer. I didn't know it would take me 10 years to learn how to write a book, but it did. So
It's
I,
not easy. It's not
no,
easy.
no, it's not easy at all. And especially, and I was a PE major in college, so I skipped every English class I could. So, I was
Yeah.
starting.
Well, and I'm a sailor. I think the only way I was able to write my book was essentially because I lived the experience and I took a lot of journal entries every single day when I was out there. And
Yes.
so in a lot of ways it was basically transcribing that. But to be able to tell this story that you have and like you said, it's inspired by and is based on the true events, but to actually create this other stuff, boy, that takes a lot when it comes to writing, a lot.
Yeah, it does. It took me a while to learn it too.
You know what? You know what? Always I hated the most though was the editing process.
Oh
I
my
absolutely.
gosh.
It's like you go snowblind. You find all these misspelled words, things like that, and then you think you've got it, and then you pick the book up again, and then you see more and more. There, for the first, because I've just published mine on Amazon, but essentially, for the first like 3 months, I had misspelled a word on the back cover, and I'm like, until somebody reached out, a lawyer actually reached out and said, "Hey, yeah, I love the book. Let me edit this thing for you." And I sent him the PDF, and she sent it back within, I think, 2 days.
Oh, that's
Perfect. And I was
great.
like,
Well, my
so
agent, I luckily just met a lady at a writing conference. Her name is Marty Rusoff, and she's really quite infamous in the publishing world. And she liked the story and agreed to be my agent. And she told me, she said, "Writing's not writing. Writing is revising," and
yeah,
and it is. And we the first thing when she read the story, she said, "I like the story. It's got real promise, but you need to hire an editor." So that was the first
yeah.
thing, and I did. And then it was edited numerous times. And but you're right, the editing process is where the book comes about. But I mean, but it is kind of, and my response, I think it's pretty common to authors and writers. When I get the response back from the editor, it looked, my manuscript looked like it was a sea of red. And
Yeah.
my first response, I'd just be angry. I said, "She's crazy." I know it's a, and then you think about it for a week or two, you say, "Well, maybe she's right." And then you think about it
Yeah.
another week or two, you say, "Well, damn it, I know she is right. I got to make all these changes." So, but that is a arduous process. Yeah.
Oh, it absolutely is. And it's why not everybody, because I think there's a part of everybody that wants to tell a story, and the idea of putting it down on paper and sharing it to the world it's something that's always cool, and everybody kind of wants to do it. But boy, it is a battle. It takes years to get
Yeah.
it just right, and that's just one book. I mean, my hat's off to some of those writers, those
Oh
authors
yeah.
that pump out a book every single year, and they've been doing it for 20. I mean,
Yeah.
pretty impressive.
Pretty impressive.
But to sort of go back to the sports and kind of utilizing it as a way to not only help people but bring people together, it seems like dragon boating especially is a great vehicle to have these big awareness and gatherings of people. And yeah, like you're saying, for literacy, for cancer awareness, it can almost be utilized for anything. I know down in St. Petersburg, Florida, there's a group called Sail Future, I believe,
Oh,
and they take sort of, I don't know if the appropriate word is troubled teens, but
sure.
basically kids who have sort of lost their way. They're getting in trouble. They're,
Yeah.
juvenile delinquents is what we called them when I was a kid.
I
And
might have been called that one time or two when I was a
oh,
kid.
I definitely I got threatened with that. We're gonna put you in juvie. Um, but they take them out on a sailboat, and one of the greatest things about the ocean is it is a great leveler of the playing
Oh, oh
field, and
yeah,
it can take the toughest, most notorious person in the world and break them down, and they're in tears, in the cabin because it's so scary, and myself included. Not gonna
yeah,
lie, but it also really ingrains that idea of like, okay, there's the six of us out here. We got this boat. We
yeah.
have to be able to utilize it to, get from point A to point B. And I suppose it might be a little scarier than the dragon boat as far as you
Yeah.
might sink, 100 miles offshore and all that.
Yeah.
But still that same thing of like, as a team, we've got to do this. We've got to go after, this is our goal. This is our challenge. And it's just such a great vehicle for that.
It is, and sailing, like you're talking about sailing and comparing it to dragon boating or other sports for that matter. You think about this tacking and what has to happen on a sailboat with just tacking and changing directions and just and the boat that we sailed on, it didn't have any electronics on it. We had to do it all by hand and crank it up
Yeah.
and you know what I'm saying. And
Oh,
that's a
yeah.
lot of coordination. I mean,
Yep.
there's a lot, and it's very technical. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and but that and working with, like you were talking about in St. Petersburg with youth, that teaches, I mean, and learning in life to work together and
Yeah.
work with other people and coordinate with other people and to some degree be subjected to them because they're depending on you and you're depending on them. And on a sailboat, not in a dragon boat, but in a sailboat, it could be life or death, and
Yeah.
it's important. And I think those are just great examples of lessons that we learn that we can translate to every part of our life, our families, and how we treat each other, and our businesses, and so forth. And sailing really is a great example of that. I mean, and because it is more dangerous for sure.
A little bit. There's a fear factor, I
Yeah.
think, that comes from it. I mean, just for example, just the other day, I was helping teach this family. So it's a mother, father, and their son. Their son's 22, 23, and essentially just teaching them how to utilize this 23-foot boat that they purchased. And we were on our second lesson, and it was windy. It was blowing good 20 knots or something on the small lake, which is a lot for your second lesson. But, we're out there, and, it was a little uneasy in the beginning. But then, as we got the rhythm down, you could see this family sort of going from a little bit hesitant to now they're sort of all engaged and they're working together. And
Yeah.
like you said, every time we tack, they're like, all right, ready to tack. And everybody's like, ready. But the really cool thing was, in the end, we got to get the boat back on the mooring buoy. And this particular spot, the mooring buoy is really close to a dock, so it was tricky. And we missed it the first like 2-3 times. But I'm standing on the back of the boat, and I'm looking forward, and I'm watching this family, and they're just like, they are all right in sync, in tune, and they kept it on that last try. And you can see the smiles, the
Oh
accomplishment, and
yeah.
everything. And then I'm thinking to myself, man, later on at dinner, they're probably going to be talking about how
Oh
great
yeah.
that was, and it's all, the root of it is just this little vehicle, this little
Yeah.
sailboat, and the sport of sailing that sort of kind of brings it all together. And it
Yeah.
sounds like dragon boating is just like that.
Well, they'll be talking about that at dinner in 20 years from now. So,
Yeah,
uh,
right.
and I think that's the specialness of the sport is just bringing people together and accomplishing something together. And just the example you gave, just one of those persons couldn't have sailed that boat. They couldn't have managed it. It took all of them.
Right.
And that's the way it is in a dragon boat. I mean, it takes us all, and everybody is part of it and has to participate. And and I think that's always the magic of any team sport or team activity that you have that just makes it a bit more special. And like the family you were talking about, I mean, that's a great moment for them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that selfishly, that's one of the things that I've always really enjoyed about
Yeah,
teaching sailing and sharing my experiences. When I was younger, I would teach on small boats, and that was, cutting my teeth at it. But even now, as someone who's done sort of the sailing that I've done, I actually people will have me come out and I'll go offshore with them. We'll go out to like Bermuda or we'll go to the Bahamas because they're looking to gain that experience.
yeah,
And I get to see that moment where you can see they get comfortable, they get that confidence, and they didn't have it before, but they've got it now. And that always I'm kind of like, yeah,
oh
right,
yeah,
we did it, we did it.
that's very rewarding. Yeah,
Oh, it absolutely is. And, it was kind of scary a couple of years ago when I started to sort of realize, I'm only in my mid 40s, but I realized that sooner or later I'm going to kind of have to hang up the adventure hat. At least the really scary big adventures.
yep,
And what do you do after that? And what I have found is sharing my experiences and helping others to start their own adventures
yeah.
has been exceedingly rewarding. It's been really fantastic. And I mean, you've done both where you've been in the boat and then I'm assuming coaching as well. So, can you talk a little bit about that? How those things are kind of different and also rewarding in both ways?
Well, coaching is obviously a different skill set than just
Yeah.
being in the boat. And I think one of the biggest lessons I've always had to learn was to learn how to lead people versus driving people. And that's I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I always made was just drive, 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 push, push, push. And you can only push people so far, and
Yeah.
they're only gonna take it so far. But if in that process, if you can begin to learn how to lead them and graciously move them forward and you're all in, like, no pun intended, the same boat together, then that I think that makes a difference. And I think that's one of the great aspects of you'll find with coaches, where they successful coaches, where they begin to learn, where they do learn how to lead and not just drive. And I think that was something that I had to learn with working with dragon boat teams.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I think even I've run a few water sports centers where I have 10 or 15 instructors and captains who I'm in charge of, and we've all got the goal. I'm trying to lead these guys, and I can drive them. There's times where I have to be like, okay, you got to do this, you got to do this, and like go go go, like it's the Christmas rush or whatever.
Yep.
But I always found that true success as a manager was always found when I could step away from the whole
Yeah.
thing and just view it from the background. And they don't need me,
Yeah.
and they've got that own self motivation to do that great job that I want them to do.
Yeah.
But they're doing it because they want to do it. And not only for them, but for the team members, the rest of the staff, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, same thing in sports. I mean,
Yeah. It is.
you can lead or you can push, and sometimes you got to do a little bit of both. But boy, a real great leader can step back, I think, and doesn't even need to be involved.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. I appreciate you sharing that. And one of the things that's kind of special with dragon boating is, you're 20 people in a boat, and you really don't have a star. I mean, you really each seat actually has its own name. They have different parts of the boat in the dragon boat that and those they have responsibilities, and like the middle of the boat is usually the bigger, stronger men,
Right.
and they call it the engine room. And at times when you want to really try to get the boat propelled for a short distance, the dragon boat, I mean the engine team, the engine group will really kick in hard
Yeah.
for a period of time. But you compare it to baseball or football. Football, you have a quarterback, you have a wide receiver. They can make great plays, and baseball, you hit a solo home run in the bottom of the ninth, a walk off home run, and you win. But in dragon boating, you never have that. You don't ever have one person that wins,
Yeah.
or kind of. I mean, all those are team sports, and it's not just one person. I understand that, but you don't have that star, if you will, and it never happens. And so consequently, every time you do it, it's 20 people equally doing it, and it's to me that's a unique factor to this sport that creates that camaraderie and that teamwork.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I could equate that kind of in the difference in the sailing world, at least. When you're talking America's Cup sailing or around the buoys racing, the helmsman or the person who's steering the boat, and then you get to like that's. Then by no means are they always going to be the star, but they're the one driving the boat.
That's right.
However, when you delve into the realm of round the world ocean racing, even when you have an entire team, yeah, you might have a captain, but everybody's on a watch system. Everybody takes their turn helming. Everybody
Yeah.
has to do this. Everybody has to be rail meat. And you do that across an ocean or around the world. That I think it's one of those things like you're saying, it's that whole team. There's
Yep.
not one single star person on there because everybody had to put in all that effort,
Yeah.
and that's a very unique thing for sure.
It is. It is unique, and it's special.
Definitely, absolutely. Well, I gotta tell you, we're getting close to the hour when I put the intro on, but I want to give you a chance to plug and shout out anything you want on the podcast. It's been absolutely wonderful to chat with you, Roger, and I'm hoping that this will not be the last time. I definitely, yeah, I my travels always take me through South Carolina, so I might have to pop up a I-95 for a hot second, pull into Charleston.
Well, I would be offended if you didn't, and it'd be our pleasure to greet you here in Charleston, and it really would. I would appreciate that. But a couple things about the book, The Final Victory, and really it's it's not necessarily plugging the book, but plugging the people in the book and their heroics, and it was 20 people who set a goal and knew that maybe they didn't have a lot of life to live. Many of them going through treatments and finishing treatments and surgeries and so forth, and it was just a moment in time that this happened that couldn't happen at another moment in time with this same group of people. So I really wanted to write the story to honor them, and my agent really pushed me for a while to try to do a memoir, and and some of the spouses, surviving spouses, and so forth were sensitive to that, and so that's one of the reasons that we chose to do it as a novel and fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Although the protagonist's trip is probably about 70% accurate, but the other characters are probably at least 90% accurate in their lives. And I wanted to share this too. The name of the book, The Final Victory, came about with from the character in the book. His name is Thomas, and in real life his name was Bob Carson. And Bob was a running back at the Citadel, which is South Carolina's military university here in Charleston,
Yep.
and he was inducted into their Hall of Fame, and he really was a very, I mean, a great athlete, but he had jaw and mouth and neck cancer, and he had numerous very disfiguring surgeries, and he couldn't eat, he could barely speak, he had a feeding tube, and when we paddled, you can go on my website and you see pictures of the team, and you can see a patch over. He had a trach in his neck, so he was having a hard time making our practices. So I went to Bob and asked him if he felt like he was going to be able to make it, be on the team, and he grunted because he could barely speak. He said, "I got to. This could be it. This could be my final deal." And that's where the
Mm.
title of the book, "The Final Victory," came from. Was
Oh, wow.
from his comment. And as we tried to attract publishers for the book, we had several folks that didn't like the title, the word "final." They felt like it was negative. But
Mm.
that was something that was one thing I was not going to give on
Bend on that. Yeah, good
or
man. It's a great title. I love it. I think it's a great title.
well, thank you, and it has meaning because and Bob passed away not long after we won the national championship, and his wife still um, paddles with us to this day. She's still part of our club here in Charleston. But it's a story that I hope can bring redemption to people who read it, bring hope to people who read it, and we don't control our lives, and we can't control exactly what happens, but we can control how we react and what we do and how we respond, and that's what I hope the book will do as people read it, and encourage them to to continue to move on and to um, press forward for what I think, and not to sound too religious, but what God still has for us to do and to live and to accomplish, and it truly opens doors. Not just cancer, but many all the situations in our lives that we have um, that could be negative and or very painful. They do open doors as well, and those doors
Yeah.
can reach other people and make a difference as well. So I'm hoping the final victory in the novel will do that for folks.
Fantastic. Well, I'll have you send me any links and things like that I can put in the description of the episode, so
Perfect.
people can find out where they can pick it up. Where can you get it? I obviously you must be able to get it on Amazon.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
I bought it on, what was it, iBooks or whatever it is on my phone. But anywhere else, is it like bookstores, all that stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much any bookstore, any local bookstore. Many of them carry it, and then Barnes and Noble, order through
Oh,
them. But
fantastic.
Books a Million, and of course Amazon. It's easy.
Right.
They make it too easy, really, I guess. But
Yeah, trust me. Well, when one of the unfortunate things with my trip, I didn't do any sort of sponsorship. So by the time I got back to land after 9 months, I had zero money, and so I tried to reach out to some publishers, and there were a lot of nibbles and stuff like that. But they wanted to, like you said, they wanted to change everything about my book,
they
and
do.
because it is that there's a few sailors from way back in the day that wrote their books, and there's only a handful of these solo round the world books that you can read. These guys, they would write it and they'd be like, "Don't even touch a thing because that is my story. I survived that." And I was kind of in that same route, but eventually found that I could do it on Amazon and
Yeah.
without having to pay anything and stuff. So
Well, it
kind
sounds
of
like to
worked
me
out
you
for
have a
me.
second book to write.
I actually have a second. I have two other books that are in the works right
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
but life just keeps getting in the way, and I've been so busy. The only way I was able to write that first book was essentially it was a great excuse to sail to the Caribbean for the winter, and
Yeah.
all I had to do was every day for 4 hours I would just write, and I never took one single day off until that first draft was done,
Yeah.
and that would be my advice to anybody that's
Me
going to
too.
try
Yep.
and write a book. Yeah. So, well, Roger, thank you again so much for
Yeah.
coming on,
Thank
and
you.
yeah, I'll definitely be in touch. Okay.
Thank you, Jerome. And I hope you have a great day, and look forward to talking to you in the future.
All right.
Bye.
Sounds good. You
Thank you.
too.
All right. Bye bye.
Yep. Bye.